Welcome to another Garage Time with Goody. And what we're going to do today is we're going to be working on a 2014 Dodge Journey 3.6 liter engine SXT all-wheel drive. Well, let's get to it. If you guys can hear that awful noise coming from this area of the vehicle, that means one of the pulleys is going bad. Which one? Well, you have to kind of find out. And this engine is side mounted. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jack up the car and I'm going to take the wheel off and the wheel well housing and check to see which pulley is giving us the trouble. I also would like to mention that there has been a slight oil leak coming out, so I have a suspicion of which pulley is causing the problems, but I just want to verify it. So with that in mind, we're going to get to the next step. Okay, for all of you do-it-yourselfers out there, or maybe you're a beginner, the first thing you want to do is put the jack underneath the car. And when you're doing so, you want to be sure and not put it on the oil pan, because if you jack this up under the oil pan, you're going to ruin your oil pan. Make sure it's not on the transmission pan. A lot of people know that, but it's just something extra I wanted to mention. Just put it on the body somewhere where the frame is stable, and then jack the car up. I'm going to get this about 3 inches off the ground. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use jack stands. Now these are for, if the jack fails and falls, then these jack stands are going to hold the car up and save your life, so the car will not fall on you. So definitely remember safety. Now that we have the car all jacked up, I'm going to use a portable impact gun. Now, if you don't have an impact gun, then you can use one of these. This is a 4-way lug wrench. I'm going to take this 19 millimeter socket. This is a deep well, but it can be a regular one. And I'm going to take off the lug nuts. So I don't lose them. And then I'm going to take the tire off. And I'm just going to lay the tire over here out of the way. And this is going to give us access to underneath the wheel well. This is going to give us access to underneath the wheel well. And where we're going to need to get to is right here. Do you see how this has this little notch cutout hole? This is going to have two 10 millimeter bolts and two plastic push pins that need to come out. One here and one there. And then we're going to be able to remove this little door, and I'm going to get access to the pulleys. I'm just going to take this flathead screwdriver and push the inside of the push pin backward. And I'm going to do the same thing for the top one and do it all around so that top comes out. Starts to come out anyway. And then I'm going to take this pry tool, this plastic pry tool, and I'm going to put it underneath and just pull back on those push pins And once I get it far enough back, the push pins should come right out just like that. And I'll be able to reuse them. You can reuse them as long as you don't break them. If you break them, then you'll have to order some online. And I'll put a link to that in the video. All right, here's the second one. There's the second push pin. Just going to set it down. And then there's going to be a 10mm bolt here and one here. And I have a ratchet with a 3-inch extension and a 10mm socket. I'm going to put it on here. I'm going to go ahead and start taking it off. There's the first one. There's the first one. And now we're going to go for the second one right here. And here's the second one. I'm going to lay it right there. And then this should just come down, this piece right here. And as you can see, I now have access to the pulleys. Since there was oil leaking all over top of the oil pan, and this right here is the oil pan, I suspect the harmonic balancer, this is known as the harmonic balancer on this car. Some people also call it the crank pulley. So that is what it is. And behind it, it has a rubber gasket that stops oil from leaking. So my suspicion is, since this car has 120,000 miles, that rubber gasket has worn out along with the bearing and is causing those problems. Now sooner or later, if I don't get this fixed, it's going to chew up the serpentine belt and then be stranded on the road, because you cannot run a car without the serpentine belt, because then the water pump would not be moving, the oil pump, you would blow up your engine. So if your belt ever comes off, ladies and gentlemen, pull your car over safely and don't drive it. I'm going to show you a way that you can test these. The first thing we're going to do to find out which pulley is bad on this engine, there is an old way, but it works good, and that is getting a long screwdriver, and you can put your ear up to it and listen to see if you hear any bad vibrations. But I have changed that method just a little bit. So what I've done is I've got a large screwdriver and I cut out a 2-liter bottle in half and I've fit it to the handle of the screwdriver. And that way I don't have to put it up to my ear. That way this is kind of like a megaphone, like a speaker. Because when you put this up to your ear and it's close to the pulleys, you could accidentally get this caught in a pulley, and this could like stab you in the head, or you could get hurt, in other words. So this is the safer way to do it. Everyone can do this a little differently, but the way I do it, your idle pulley, the bolt usually isn't spinning. So you can lay this up against that bolt that's not spinning. However, if you're testing your alternator or your water pump, usually those bolts are spinning with the pulley. So you don't want to really put the screwdriver over a moving bolt, and you don't want to get it caught on the pulley at all. So if you just lay the screwdriver flat on the casing of the alternator out of the way of the pulley, same with the oil pump and the water pump and the AC compressor and so on, then that is the best way to do it. You don't want to put it on the moving bolt. Again, most idle pulleys, that bolt's not moving, and it's okay just to put it on the bolt, on a bolt that's not moving. And if there are any bad bearings, or if it's bad, you will be able to hear it through this right here. Now what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start up the car and we're going to test. That's a normal sound. It's not the air conditioner. See, there's the air conditioner and there's no bad noise. The bad noise is coming from this, the harmonic balancer or the crank pulley, whichever you want to call it. So we're going to have to replace that. I'm going to end up using this small 1/4 inch ratchet, and I'm just going to fit it into the tensioner pulley. I'm just going to go ahead and pull it off right here, and as you can see, I'm going to pull the serpentine belt off of all the pulleys underneath the car, and you can see it underneath here, and this tensioner belt's going to come down. Then I'm going to go above the car and open the hood and make sure it's disconnected from the pulleys up there. So I'm sticking my hand underneath this heater hose. Now make sure that the car has been setting for a while so that nothing is hot. These are the last 2 pulleys that I had to get the serpentine belt off. And I'm just going to make sure it's not connected to any of the pulleys, and I'm just going to go ahead and pull this on up out of there. Just like so. And this is your serpentine belt. And if you want to look at the serpentine belt right here, you can see that it's cracked and it's starting to break down. And that could be due to the bad bearing on the crank pulley. See, it's right here, it's in bad shape too. I don't know if you got that or not. See, right here it's in bad shape. Right there the belt's in bad shape. And sooner or later what that will do, it would cause the belt to break into or shred, and then all of the components that are connected to pulleys would not be working. Therefore the water pump would not be working, or the oil pump, and then the engine would eventually heat up if you kept driving it. So I bought a new serpentine belt to go back in after we change out the crank pulley. So you're going to need to replace your serpentine belt with a new one. Right here is the pulley, and I've got a 1 1/16 socket on this portable 20-volt impact gun. It's coming. So if it's stuck and you're using an electric drill, you might want to make sure your battery's powered up and use the trigger in short bursts. And eventually it will come off there, and you will see that there is a seal behind this. So on a lot of harmonic balancers and crank pulleys, you would have to use a tool that goes over it like this, and it has bolts and it would have to pull it off. But this you don't. This is a keyed pulley. As you can see that notch right there, and you just easily pull this just right out. You can do it with your hands and your fingers. And just be easy and careful, pull that right out. Here's the new one on the right and the old one on the left, and you can see where the bearing goes that it's rusted, and you can also see this right here is starting to come out of the inner part of the pulley, whereas this is flush and flat. So I'm going to be putting this new one right here on, but before I do that, I'm going to have to replace the, behind this is a rubber seal. There's going to be this rubber seal that I'm going to replace. This is the new one, and usually when those pulleys go bad, they damage these seals and oil starts leaking out slowly, and that's what's been happening in our situation. So I'm going to be using these little tools, these little picks, to get out the rubber gasket, the rubber seal, and I'm going to put in the new one.
It turns out whoever said you could remove the seal with picks was very, very wrong. And you'll see in just a second what I mean when I say that.
There has been videos where people used a pick to get this seal out, or they've just pulled it out. That is false. This is going to be in here good, really good. So one of the better ways to get this out is to use like a flathead screwdriver, a pretty big one, and a rubber hammer, and just to go around it and hit it with the rubber hammer, and then it will break that seal. It's not just as easy as a pick, not even close. And then it pops right out just like this, and then ready to put the new one in. Alright, when you install the new one, you'll make sure that these indentions or these notches face outward. Now you'll want to go ahead and clean in here with the rag, which I've already done, before you place the new one in. And you want to go around with your fingers and just push lightly. So the easiest way to get this seal back in is to take a smaller deep well socket, like this is a 14 millimeter, and you take a rubber mallet, and like say if you start at the bottom, you start here, and you just keep tapping like this. Then you go to the side, and then the top, and then the side, and you do it all the way around until it's on here real good. And then once it's in, you are ready for the crank pulley. Okay, the next step is to put the harmonic balancer back on. This is a key harmonic balancer. Right here is the indention or the notch. I want to find out on the rod for the crank where that notch is, just like when you took it off. And it is clearly here at the top. So I'm going to line up this pulley with that notch, and I'm just going to set it on. There, it felt like it notched in. Yeah, it went in the notch. Once it goes in the notch, you'll know because the rod in the notch, you can just push it on back and it goes on back in just like that. So now is the time to put the bolt back in. I'm just barely putting it on enough by hand. I'm taking the impact wrench and I'm going to Put it on there until it gets snug. Okay, now we're going to need to put the plastic splash. We're going to need to put the plastic splash shield cover back on. You'll want to put these metal tabs behind the body and not in front of it, and this plastic piece over this plastic piece, and take these 10mm bolts and just start them in by hand. I'm going to start the second one in by hand. I'm going to see how far I can get them in with just the 10mm socket by hand, and then I'll tighten them down. By the way, I will be putting the torque specs to the Harmonic balance bolt and the other bolts in the video description if you guys want to check that out. We'll also be putting the Serpentine Belt diagram right about here, and then you can pause it if you need to, so you know how to get that back on. Okay, I've got those hand tightened, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and put the plastic push pins back in. I'm going to first put the one in the top, put that one in, and then I'm just going to push it down. I'm going to do the same for the bottom down here. And I'm going to finish tightening these two 10mm bolts. And they don't need to be too tight. I'd say about 2 pounds, about 2-3 foot-pounds should do it. And it's all back together. So now we're ready to put the tire back on. Ready. Okay, so we got the 19mm deep well socket. I'm going to put the lug nuts back on, and I'm going to go slow so it doesn't get cross-threaded, and then I'm just going to trigger it down, and then I'm going to put them in diagonally so it'll go on nice and flush. So it's time to let the car down. So I'm going to get the jack stands, which are underneath. One jack stand. Two jack stands. Now that these are out of the way, I'm going to put this over here. Time to let the car down. Turn the jack to the left and it should go down. So then you just put the hood, drop her down, and then we're going to start her up, see how she sounds. As you can see, it's running nice and it's purring like a kitten. So if you have any questions, just leave them in the comment section below. Thank you for joining me for another video. And until something falls apart again, thank you for tuning in to another Garage Time with Goody. Until next time, another one bites the rust.